Hello, everyone. My name is Seth Jordan, and I'm with my friend and colleague, Robert Kavelnikoff. And we are hosting a workshop in Viroqua, Wisconsin from February 21st through 23rd. Is that right, Robert? Those are the right dates?
20th. 20th.
20th through 23rd. And we wanted to share a little bit about the workshop and our inspiration behind it. So the workshop is called We the People, and it's about the American Constitution on the surface. That's going to be what we're wrestling with, and we'll be going in different directions with that. And just to say, we've been doing workshops in Wisconsin together for the last few years, and we are working with an approach that's a bit different than other people's approach. So it's really working out of the insights, the social insights of Rudolf Steiner. And so his insights are often referred to as social threefolding because it looks at the health of the social organism of society in relationship to yeah, it understands it as the relationship of culture, politics, and economics, and what's the healthy balance of powers there? What's the healthy dynamics there? So yeah, we're coming with that approach, and we wanted to delve into the Constitution and related themes, and so we wanted to share a little bit of our inspiration. Robert, do you want to start us off with a little, yeah, what's moving you?
Sure, Seth. So I had the opportunity to talk about threefolding the last year with a group of people with no background in threefolding who are coming out of kind of a libertarian bent. And I spoke to them about the concept of we the people in the Constitution, and I connected that to the spiritual cultural life. And the preparation for that event and my delving a little bit into the Constitution and the really positive response I got just really inspired me about the idea of working with the Constitution as a foundation for social threefolding in the United States. And, I realized that as threefolders, you know, we often don't talk about the macro pictures as much because it feels so impossible, like under current circumstances of our government. How could we ever bring about a threefold constitution in the US? And so I, anyway, have tended to focus on local projects or organizational level threefolding. But I realized that the Constitution is so informed by a kind of instinctive threefolding. For example, the three branches of government and the check and balance systems between them, that it really just came to me that we need to ground our threefolding movement in the US in a deeper understanding of the Constitution on the one hand, and on the other hand, we need to start talking about what would a set of agreements look like that in our age could actually bring health and order into the body social, right? We need checks and balances between government, economy, and culture in the way they needed checks and balances between the executive branch and the legislative branch and the judicial branch. And without that, I mean, we're going downhill fast. We don't have the kind of guardrails that are needed to create sanity. And so a lot of inspiration came through for me. And then I'll just briefly say I did another little workshop during the elections, the recent presidential elections, in which I had people from various political stripes in the room and really worked with some of these questions, worked with questions of polarization, and it was very well received. People really loved the opportunity to have a civil conversation where different points of view could be shared. And so I just realized that I think our work, it's time to go back to the macro, but this time through the lens of the Constitution and look at what would a healthy set of agreements look like at this time in history as a basis for then doing our work at the local level or the organization, wherever it has to come down to those realities, but that we need this kind of work. That's what got me inspired, Seth. So I'm going to hand it off to you, and I'm interested in what's the inspiration you're bringing to this?
Yeah, thanks. It's helpful to hear. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I find most kind of challenging and also most inspiring is that when you look back at the history, um, we have such a kind of like flat picture of it, that it's kind of like this is something that was created. Thomas Jefferson said that the Constitutional Convention was an assembly of demigods, and we have this feeling that this was like some kind of semi-divine creation out of thin air. But when you look back at it and you see how much they wrestled, and how difficult it was for them, and how they thought like, oh my God, like this is a failure. So many of them, the framers were super enthusiastic about having been able to create it at all. But yeah, no one thought it was perfect, and um, and and they weren't demigods in this sense. They were also, I mean, I think it's so important to recognize that they'd been in this conversation for decades, and they'd created their own state constitutions, and yeah, they'd been working off the political philosophies of John Locke and all these different individuals. So they were in this conversation together, and it's not a conversation we're in anymore. And why aren't we in that conversation? And I would say we're not in that conversation because of our relationship to the Constitution today, because we don't perceive it as a living document. Um, and just to kind of like poke holes at it for a moment, it's, like if it was a perfect document, it didn't have the Bill of Rights to begin with. So that was an addition, which is useful. There were no term limits for presidents. The president and the vice president were supposed to be elected. It was the first person who got the most votes and the second person who got the second most votes. But that meant that political opponents would be ruling together, which didn't work out at all. There's just all of these different aspects which they were like, oh, that didn't work, so let's amend it. Um, and yeah, what are the amendments that we need today? Um, and yeah, what you pointed to, I mean, I think there's like very basic things we should look at, things like how do we break the two-party stranglehold? Also, how do we work with this whole question of money, of wealth, and its influence on politics? And then there's also just bigger questions. How do we make it into a living document? Meaning, Jefferson had this feeling that he described it as the earth belongs to the living, that every generation should create the Constitution anew for themselves, which he thought very technically should be kind of every 19 years, and kind of worked it out. But really, the spirit of that is that we shouldn't be forced to kind of obey. We shouldn't just inherit the laws of our fathers and grandfathers and great great grandfathers. We should create our own laws out of our own feeling life today. And this is why, in a sense, they were demigods, because they went through this whole conversation. They went through this whole kind of crucible, and we don't go through that anymore. But that should be an ongoing activity. So yeah, I mean, there's other big themes that I think we'll take up. The whole question of rights versus duties, and there's just so many different, yeah, important aspects to kind of wrestle with. So yeah, we will get into the particularities of that, but yeah, maybe you want to say a little bit how we're thinking about working.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Seth. Yeah, I just want to give a little picture of like what you can expect if you come to this workshop. And if you've never worked with Seth and I want to say that a big part of our work is to establish the right culture for how we're going to work together as a group, to really ground ourselves in good speaking and listening skills, and to try to create a kind of social vessel where creative ideas and creative impulses can arise, and that each of our unique brilliance can show up and contribute to a greater whole. This is kind of foundational to our work. But in addition, I think this year we're really going to take the topic of polarization head on. Seth just mentioned the stranglehold of the two-party system, but also what's the inner dimension of polarization? How can we each become less polarized in our thinking and behaving? I'm also going to bring a little bit of an esoteric picture of the origins of polarization, of what lives behind these two parties from a spiritual scientific point of view, because I think it's important. And then just to say, we're not going to be wordsmithing a new constitution. It's not going to be like a high school civics exercise or something. yes, we'll do a little bit of looking at the Constitution, but I think what I'm imagining we're going to be doing is trying to articulate as the guiding principles necessary to create a new constitution or a new set of agreements that would bring health into the rights life and the relation of the rights life to the economic life and the cultural life and so on in each of these spheres. What are the guiding principles and what might it look like to bring those guiding principles into a set of agreements? So we will explore what a new constitution might look like, but in this short workshop, it's not like we're going to create a new constitution, but we're going to set something in motion. And this could be an ongoing long-term project. We'll see where it goes. Um, Last thing I just want to say about the methodology is we will ground this work in specific problem areas. And maybe I'll let Seth say more about that. He already started, but we can't cover all of them, obviously, but there's a lot of juicy, really difficult tensions in our society right now, and we want to dig into those. So I'll let you say a few words, and then we'll wrap up.
All right. Yeah, just to add to what you were saying, Robert. Yeah, there is the kind of particular specific ideas we're planning to work with, specific also methodologies. But yeah, also just this the trying to get to the spirit behind what was created as well. So, and I don't mean that in a kind of in a spiritual sense so much, but just the why. You know, why was the First Amendment created? What was the need in the human soul, and what is that need today? How has it evolved? How is it? Yeah, and yeah,
Mm.
looking at a number of things in that way, not getting too kind of bogged down in the letter of what's there, not in, as you said, not necessarily wordsmithing and trying to write anything new, but just really trying to kind of orient ourselves differently to this whole work. And so that we can, yeah, we can be in the world and be working in relationship to these realities with a clear orientation in a sense. Um, and yeah, we will be working with also specific methodologies. Do we want to say a word about that?
Yeah, yeah. Take another minute, and then I'll maybe contextualize it locally a little bit. But yeah,
Yeah. Well, maybe why don't you say it? Because yeah, you could say both the local and kind of
okay.
yeah.
Well, we will be working a little bit with the methodology that comes from an organization called Braver Angels, whose mission is to build civil dialogue between liberals and conservatives and people of every political stripe. And I've been quite active in that organization at times and find that they have some very helpful methodologies. So, for example, they have a little workshop called Depolarizing from Within that we will do some work with. And and then we may also, so just to contextualize this a little bit, Seth has been coming to Viroqua and the Driftless region now for a number of years. We've been doing these workshops and we built up a local threefolding group. And that group has launched a project called the Culture Bridging Project. So we're like working with this region as a little laboratory for threefolding. And so the Culture Bridging Project will probably organize 1 or 2 evenings during this workshop. One may be a town hall meeting for Viroqua where we bring a lot of dynamic, interesting economic, political, and cultural leaders together to talk about the future of the community. And then we may also, we're hoping to get a representative from Braver Angels from their Wisconsin chapter here, and maybe to have them talk a bit about Braver Angels, but also perhaps facilitate a Braver Angels debate. We'll see. Seth and I are still working out the details, but we're going to bring the local work into this workshop that's very focused on a kind of macro picture, and we think that'll create a very dynamic, exciting time together.
Yeah. That's the hope. And yeah, we're both excited about it. So should we leave it there? Is there anything else we need to?
Yeah, don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions. Driftless is a beautiful area. We can handle the transportation. We have a lot of homestays. We can make this very affordable. And we'd love to have you come out, especially if you have, yeah, we want to get a lot of different political stripes into the room so that we can really have a dynamic conversation. And don't worry if you have no background in threefolding. It's not it's not really not that complicated. And it's just a great framework to have fruitful conversations about society. So,
And maybe the information for the conference and how to register, we'll put it down in the description for the video.
okay,
Cool, cool.
beautiful. Thank
Nice.
you, Seth. Thanks everyone who's taken the time to listen.
Yeah, look forward to seeing some of you there.